is proof positive of our need and our desire to love and understand each other. And I think that whenever we, the children of survivors living in the African diaspora, whenever we come together to shore up our love, it's a celebration. It's a celebration because for so many hundred years, there have been all kinds of forces arrayed against our love. And here we are, the first generations of Africans in the Americas who are up off of our knees. In many ways, we can say that we are the flowers in bloom. The flowers in bloom because yesterday's black people's dreams were really not for themselves. Their dreams were for their children. And we are those children. And if we're going to take the legacy, that important and powerful legacy that's been handed to us, if we're going to take that legacy and parlay it into a glorious tomorrow, we're going to have to commit to each other. You don't need me to remind you of the negative statistics that point to our pain in this America. We know that while we sit here rather comfortable on 138th Street, that drugs are running roughshod through this very community and throughout our communities all across this country. We know that 1/2 of our children are poor in this nation. We know that in America, the wealthiest country in the world, we have increasing numbers of homeless people, increasing numbers of hungry people, increasing numbers of hopeless people. And we also know that there's a war on black people in America. And it's real difficult to love and resist at the same time. It's real hard to fight a war and love at the same time. And you know, I've come to a new resolve within myself. I'm not going to just point the finger alone at whomever sits in the Oval Office. I'm not going to point that finger alone at politicians and religious leaders and civic leaders. I'm not going to do that. You know who I'm going to point the finger at? At you and me. You and me. The most affluent, educated group of Africans anywhere in the world. That's who we are. And what's so incredible to me is that wherever I travel, just in the last maybe 9 months, I've been in Zimbabwe. I flew off with a team to South Africa when Nelson Mandela was released, went with his daughter Zinani to share time with the family and bring back the story that's in the current issue of Essence. My family is from the Caribbean. I travel throughout the Caribbean. Wherever I go in this world, and I see people of African ancestry, you know who represents their hope for the future? It's us. All around this globe, African people are looking toward African Americans as their hope for building a positive future. They're looking at you and me. So the continuing pain in black America is not dependent on what happens in the White House. It's not dependent alone on who we elect to represent us on a community level. The continuing pain in black America is dependent on you and me not getting along. It's dependent on our inertia. It's dependent on you and I standing still. It's dependent on you and I continuing to buy in to that nonsense that Hollywood has taught us. What we have to do is create some new criteria for love. Sister Camille Yarborough said it so plainly. You know, there are people, it's interesting that I'm even speaking about relationships. Even though Essence covers relationships a lot, there is nothing that I personally am more interested in. You know, some people have called me a radical feminist. There are other people who've said that I'm an apologist for black men. I define myself as a truth seeker. A person is really trying to heal the wounds between us. And sometimes in bearing the truth, you hurt people's feelings and you say things that people rather not deal with. It was Essence that first brought up the color question. It's Essence that really cautions black men to make sure that we don't negate dark-skinned black women. What we try to do is really tell the truth. I see myself mainly as a student of history. And when I look to the history and I think about how we loved, as Sister Camille said, in spite of the odds, I know that we have the strength today to heal the wounds between us. I love reading those slave narratives that were done during the 1930s when some of the former slaves were still alive. You know that during slavery, our ancestors were not allowed to marry. Marriage wasn't allowed. But we created our own ritual. We jumped that broom. And we know that when slavery ended, there were no 40 acres. There were no mules. During slavery, the folks said that the harshest punishment they could have been rendered against the slave, it wasn't the whip or the lash. You know what it was? It was separation from the family. When slavery ended, black men and black women roamed through the South. No, we didn't have 40 acres. No, we didn't have mules. We didn't have any money. Most of us didn't have any shoes, tattered garments. Whatever we had, we were carrying. Walking through the South looking for each other. Husbands looking for wives. Wives looking for husbands. Siblings looking for each other. Children looking for parents. African Americans have a long and glorious history of loving and supporting each other. As late as the turn of the century, do you know that 90% of our children were born into two-parent households? In 1970, 75% of children of African ancestry were born into a nuclear family. There's a war on black people. There's a war on black people. And it's the war that's preventing us from coming together in ways that we need to. And what I want to talk a little bit about tonight is the importance of loving and understanding yourself. Because I believe that no matter how hard we may try to heal the wounds between us, if those wounds exist, I don't know about the rest of you, but I love black men. You know, I'm not angry at any black men. In fact, you know, the folks who know my personal history, my mother will say to me, how could you have your ex-husband, your ex-husband come and have dinner with us on Thanksgiving? Not that she doesn't like him, she just doesn't understand how I can relate to him like that, you know? And the people who know what happened in that relationship, I'm home. I was born in this neighborhood. This is my neighborhood. Y'all are family, so I'm going to tell you all the truth, you know. I was in a relationship that was very painful and that was violent. And the people who know about that relationship will always say to me, how could you even entertain having a dialogue with your former husband? You know what I have to remember? Nobody made me marry him. Nobody dragged me down any aisle. Nobody tied me up and said, you must say I do. Nobody threatened me. I chose that person. And what I've learned during the 20 years between that marriage and the new marriage I've just entered into is that it's not about looking for the right person. It's about becoming the right person. To be honest with myself, the things that I have blamed men for are the very things that need fixing in me. The very things that need fixing in me. We have got to learn how to love ourselves. We have got to give ourselves permission to love ourselves. We have got to make our own lives our number one priority. And this is particularly hard for women. This is particularly hard for black women to do. You know why? Because we're raised to serve. We're raised to believe that everything and everybody is more important than we.